Okay, so I think it would be great to jump into.
Are we going?
You're scared.
We're going.
Oh, I'm
Is that
sorry.
your scared face?
I thought you were just still talking to me.
No, this
so I was
is
playing
how it
around.
works.
We're doing it now.
We just are talking.
Here we
now.
go.
We're just gonna talk
Okay.
now. I want you to talk a little bit more just about how, like, kind of going further into the facets of like fear, anxiety, like all the different words that are sort of in that little pie piece.
Wow. I think the power of the emotion wheel and what we can work with individuals on is putting the right word to what's going on. When we said earlier in the Mayfield Minute about what does it indicate, that's the real work, that the emotion is serving a purpose. We probably know the old fight, flight, or freeze component.
Yep.
And that probably worked really well in a different society than ours.
Yeah.
There is
More simple times.
Yeah, simple times now.
Sure.
And there's certainly, though there's still that reaction. Why is my heart beating? Why is adrenaline flowing?
Yep.
What's going on? And it's really complicated if there's not a true threat.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we forget that we get to be our own advocates as we are experiencing emotions. And I guess I can only speak for myself, but certain emotions I learned I didn't want to have with other people or things like that. But within that, I also didn't get to learn how to navigate my own way through it. And so I think this one in particular, it can feel really out of control when you feel really anxious or you feel really scared or you are overwhelmed or whatever it might be. And I think your point of like gathering the data, taking time to figure out what's going on, like working in our own systems.
Yeah.
To me, that truly speaks of advocating for ourselves.
It is. I'm going to, as we discuss this part, the part that also came to my mind is that usually with an emotion that we don't want, we'll say, what's wrong with me? Or worse, we're in fear and someone is introducing to us, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Let's look at it as what's wrong.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
That's the greatest part for us, is to say what's wrong, intellectually exploring it, as opposed to that it is wrong or something's wrong with me that I am fearful about.
Right.
And then I want to clarify, though, that in the way I look at it, that fear is, again, the idea, I'm not going to survive. And that one's tough.
Yeah.
Below that one, though, I think is anxiety.
Okay.
The idea that, hey, my thoughts are running and my body is preparing for some type of needed response. And then we're looking at probably worry or overwhelmed. And when we can put words to the emotions, it really helps us figure out where we are in regards to actually risking harm, or that we're probably in a real part of, I'm feeling this way because I haven't really taken self-care.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Especially that overwhelmed and worried
feeling,
I know can really get us off when we haven't taken the time to ask ourselves, what do I need? What's going on in my life? How can I care for myself well? Absolutely. What do you think are ways for people to maybe start to practice trying to engage differently with some of these emotion words that we've been talking about?
Ooh, I'm going to go back to self-care first, if that's okay.
Yep.
The idea that regardless of upbringing or current traumas, if we have a self-care baseline, we're going to be doing better. If I'm already here with regards to life and how I'm viewing my childhood and those things, it doesn't take much for one thing more to
push you over the edge.
Push me over the edge, right? That's the concept that people often have. So when we're looking at that, taking self-care reduces that, gives us more an objective idea that I'm doing okay, and I have room for when something happens. It's not taking me all the way up to fear.
Absolutely. I think that's so great. Something too that was kind of running through my mind that touches on something you were speaking earlier of is when we can stop that language or that narrative in our head of what's wrong with me or what did I do wrong or whatever that might be. If we can start to take a look at our stories, at our childhood, at our experiences without us to be blamed, I think it gives us room then to start to be able to identify like why we are feeling the way we're feeling, or experiencing the things that we're experiencing. And I think part of being able to view our lives that way is truly engaging in self-care, because when we start to nurture and care for ourselves, I think we start to see ourselves differently. We stop seeing ourselves as the point of blame.
Right. And we're self-defining, which is great too. I'm absolutely with you in that regard. And just like you, just kind of thinking through, because it's an unscripted conversation, which is the fun part of it, is that with that self-care, it also gives us the chance to look at the messages and the beliefs that were possibly imposed on us, or worse, we impose on ourselves.
We took upon ourselves.
And that's the neatest part in therapy, is when you get to sit as a therapist, when you get to sit with the individual and just helping them unpack that I don't have to be fearful. Unless it's a rabid bear. Then we'll do that one. But
valid fear there. Get out.
But the idea is I can be anxious, and then I get to explore why.
Totally.
And then it brings, like we just said, it just brings everything down on how to view life.
It all pieces together for sure. I think that's so good.
I'm wondering, with a lot of these quote unquote bad emotions.
Yes.
It seems like a common theme is like you actually have to sit with it in order to experience what it's trying to help you with. What's that like with fear? Because sometimes it feels like a rabid bear.
Yeah. I think that's the value of it, is that we think we're only supposed to have positive feelings, and a negative is a bad, but a negative is a chance to grow. And again, we're talking about feelings and thinking, so we're going to respect it.
Sure.
That's why we encourage sitting with it, letting it indicate where you want to grow.
Well, and I think, because I think likely any human can't just like jump in and sit with fear and it's great and blah, blah, blah. But I think if you pull back and you find yourself worried and you're like, okay, I know it's not a rabid bear at that point, I just feel worried. Can you sit with it in that moment and practice so that maybe the next time you feel anxious, you're like, okay, I sat with worry, now I can sit with anxiety, and you practice. And then hopefully you're building that muscle so that by the time you get to fear, where you straight up are like terrified, that you know how to kind of take inventory of what's going on. You know, is somebody in my house? Was that the wind? Like, you know, like whatever the thing might be, you can still sort of try and grab a little bit of that logic piece that you need, even though the fear feels really big or inflated or whatever. That's my first thought.
It's a very robust discussion today, I'll tell you, because I'm going to guess that when people are thinking about fear, post-traumatic stress comes in as well, if that's okay to introduce that component. That is absolutely anxiety and fear off to a really remapping of the brain. So the part we're talking about is still the fundamental basis of
foundation.
If it's a real threat, of course, address it. If it's not, learn from it, sit in it, figure it out, sit with a therapist to kind of sound it out, self-care. It's just a better way to go through life.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think just touching on that concept of PTSD, like there are very real reasons why people have that response and their brain has started to be wired that way. Is because their experiences have taught them to be in that vigilant state. And so I think it's really important to touch on, but I think you're right, like that is such a different level than kind of this foundational space that we're talking about. So
just wanted to make that distinction for the folks that are watching that have that aspect of PTSD. We're not going to try and oversimplify. Because that's a more, and that's what I do. I work I work with a lot of great folks that are working through PTSD. So we're talking about fear and anxiety.
Foundational things. Yep. So I really want you guys, if you've stuck with us through this conversation, I really want y'all to practice the idea of being able to slow your roll and take some inventory not in the really intense emotions, but when it's just that little like needling, like something's bugging you in your brain and you don't know what it is, or something feels off and you don't know what it is, or you're kind of worried because you have to have a conversation with your boss today, or whatever the thing might be, like see if you can kind of take some inventory and start practicing that, so that when life gets hard and life gets scary, you are already versed in taking data, practicing
the data. If I could just interrupt on that part,
yes.
Where's the data? That's a really great one. And when I work with folks with anxiety, what's the data? And not to question the valid emotion, just to get the intellectual component in there to help.
Yeah, it pulls you out. Yeah. It pulls you out of that swirly space. So, all right, friends, thanks for sticking with us. I really loved that conversation.
Thanks
I feel like it was fun to dive in deeper. So get yourselves to Friday. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.